tutors, mentors, and the city with your host.com.
The City Tutors presents
Tutors, Mentors, and the City
with your host.com.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Kevin.com Brown, and welcome to Tutors, Mentors, and the City. And please join me and welcome our guest for this episode, Miss Angie Kamath. Yay! Angie, how are you?
Hi, Kevin. I'm so glad to be here. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon to you as well.
Yes, absolutely. So I never know what my opening question is going to be until we start the interview. So what is jumping out at me, screaming out at me is you have a flag over your shoulder that says NYU. What is your affiliation with NYU?
Sure. So I am the Dean of the School of Professional Studies at NYU, and I've been here, it'll be 2 years this summer. I joined in July 2021, so still while we were in kind of part of just working through the pandemic. And I've been in higher ed for a couple of years. Before that, I was at the City University of New York. So really lifelong New Yorker, care a lot about anchor institutions and making sure that our city is great. I've worked for government, I've worked for CUNY, now I'm working for NYU. So yeah, I feel really privileged to be able to be here and running a school.
Well, you know, I love the way you answered. You refer to so many aspects of my questions just in that response, right? So let me hit you with this. I remember being a young lad in junior high school going to the guidance counselor. And the guidance counselor would say, what do you want to be when you grow up, right? I think we all went through that. They painted a picture as if you go get that one job, you stay on that one job till you're 65, you retire, you move to Florida, and you live happily ever after.
Right. And
apparently, it's not just me, but life doesn't really work like that, does it?
It's true. It's true. I think the research says that most folks will have multiple careers and maybe something like 25 to 30 jobs within a lifetime. I think I'm on job 7 or 8. What's funny is I really focus in on workforce development and career training and getting jobs. And I've done this in about 5 different organizations. And so I always feel a little bit bad, like, can I not hold down a job in this whole area where I'm supposed to be an expert in jobs? But the fact of the matter is, I feel like I keep switching teams in the same area. And it's been really fun for me to try to really focus in on what does industry want, and how do we make sure that we're training really talented people from across New York City from very different kind of perspectives to get into great careers. And the fact of the matter is, when you're doing it for a nonprofit in the Bronx, or you're doing it at the City University of New York, or for government, or for NYU, the issues are all fundamentally the same. There's a lot of individuals, whether you graduated from high school or didn't, whether you have an associate's degree or not, whether you have a bachelor's degree or not, whether you have a bachelor's degree from a private institution or a public institution, helping people find their potential and helping people understand very much what you described in junior high. Totally cool to have multiple jobs, totally expected to have multiple jobs. The research says, I think smart psychologists from Stanford have really looked into this. There's often this phrase, Kevin, of like, follow your passion and you'll work never a day in your life. And the fact of the matter is, it's not singular passion. Like, most people have 3 to 4 passions and probably 3 to 4 totally different careers that they could be awesome at, successful at, win at, and be excited about. And so I think about that a lot, because I do think that we still continue to kind of expect people to have a singular answer for what they want to do when they grow up. And that's just kind of not how my career has worked out. I don't know about you. Maybe it's not how your career worked out, but it's really not how the majority of people kind of find their vocation or their calling.
You're adding such insight, such depth to the challenges that young college students about to graduate are facing, because when you go to college, we say, pick your major, right?
I know.
Then you can minor in something. You could take 12 additional credits of something else, but pick your major. And then what's your career path? What's your degree in?
Yeah.
So it's still perpetuating that thing, right?
You're right. You're right.
Now, what's your thoughts on that?
Gosh, a lot of complications, right? It shouldn't be as complicated, but a lot of factors, I would say. So the fact of the matter is 97%, I think the research says 97% of new jobs require a credential beyond high school. So to folks who are sort of wondering, do I even need to go to college? Do I need it? The answer is pretty conclusively, you need some post-secondary because the majority of new jobs require it. So that's one piece. Another piece is when we start thinking about skills that people need to be successful, and there's been a lot of thoughts on this. And, do I want someone who has, a history and English major because they can communicate, they know how to kind of understand where we've been in order to where we go, and communication skills are super important. And the fact of the matter is yes. I mean, I remember at some point, might be dated information, but 5 years ago, there were more non-STEM majors who got hired by Google than computer scientists. Because a place like Google is big. You have a marketing and sales, communication departments, all sorts of operational non-coding jobs. And yet everyone thinks, oh, I better become a computer scientist because that's where the jobs are. So I'm probably rambling in this answer, but I would say what we know is there are 3 groups of skills that are super important that can be acquired in any type of major, and that you can change and switch and transfer the skills almost entirely. And those 3 job skills groupings are human skills. So just being able to talk like we're talking right now, being able to communicate, being able to be empathetic, human skills, just being able to kind of work with others. The second group is tech enabling skills. So not being a coder, but though you could have kind of coding in that, but, being able to work an Excel sheet, being able to work with some amount of data, being able to, have technical solutions. So if you're in event management and, you're working for a company to, host and produce events, that could be really, really creative, but you also just have to know how to put together a budget, right? And make sure that your event is profitable, even if you're a completely creative type. And then the third set of skills are business enabling skills. So managing a project, managing budgets, managing teams, being able to communicate what's working, what's not working. And so human skills, tech-enabled skills, and business-enabling skills are the 3 groups. And yes, we do ask people to pick a major to kind of go deep into something. And I think that's where people should follow their interests. Folks should also know that you can acquire human, tech, and business skills in so many contexts. Every employer I listen to deeply believes in the liberal kind of studies and humanities because that teaches us to be critical thinkers, great communicators, and good analysts. Most companies also really appreciate folks with really good tech skills because there's just so much opportunity that we need to have with kind of real technologists. And as we have all seen through artificial intelligence, you're always going to need humans to do the work, to manage people, to inspire people, to mentor people. And so I have a colleague at NYU, Dr. Anna Tavis, who heads up a lot of our human capital management work. And she has this catchphrase that I use all the time, and I try to make sure I always credit her with it, which is the future of work is human. And I love it because I think people can get really nervous and scared of being tracked to your original question of like, oh gosh, there's so many jobs in tech. Do I have to be a computer scientist to be successful, to afford to live in New York, to have a good life? And the answer is no. The future of work is human. And we need people who can really work together, communicate, solve problems, manage projects, use a bit of data for sure, and think about how we can apply, technology to some of the biggest problems that we face as a city or society or community.
Outstanding response. You had me pull out my phone to take some notes as you were speaking. Let's go back to you. Let's pivot to you for a second.
Okay.
Were you identified as brilliant as a youngin? Were you, when you were a little one? Well, not professors back in elementary school, but did your teachers say, "This Angie, she is so special"? Did they know that at an early age?
I'm a card-carrying member of nerddom. So I don't know that anyone call me brilliant, but I'm a solid, proud nerd and always have been and have always been recognized as one.
Well, nerds rule the world, it turns out. Nerds rule the world. So
I'm totally cool with it. Have always been.
yes, absolutely. So where were you born?
I was born in Long Island, Smithtown, New York. My family just celebrated their 54th year of being in America. I was born in a small Long Island town where my parents, after they immigrated to this country, they spent a few years in Jamaica, Queens, and then they moved out to Long Island, and that's where they still are.
Ah, okay. And public school or private school?
Public school.
In my family, the heritage of my family, when there was a young lady, one of my young cousins, older than me, cousins.
Okay.
But both of my parents were from South Carolina, a little town called Hemingway. And when they noticed that female who was brilliant, one of the aunts or the grand aunts or somebody would intervene and make sure that young lady got fast tracked to educational opportunities. Like,
yep,
awesome. Got to make sure she's, gets every chance to spread her wings. Did you have any situations like that you can recall?
So, it's so I feel like yes. And it also, I think, looked different for me as a first generation American. And so with immigrant parents, Asian immigrant parents, I mean, very much the stereotype. So we were frugal savers. We weren't flashy. We didn't have a big house or fancy cars, but we would study hard, save our money. And, in language of today, like we would hustle and, figure out kind of, what to do. So my dad was an engineer and he, invested a lot in the stock market. My first job was a paper girl riding my little bike around the neighborhood, doing penny savers, these kind of, every Saturday, the newspaper. And with my earnings, my dad encouraged me. I actually like doing it. So I don't want to say he made me, but he encouraged me to invest in the stock market. So I've been investing in the stock market since I was 10. And so I share that with when you know that your parents gave everything up in their country to come here to work for better opportunity, to make sure that I and my brother succeeded and had every opportunity available to us. They didn't know what the opportunities were. They didn't know the programs to help me fast track. They just made sure that my expectation was, you're getting A's and you're going to have a side job and you're going to figure out how to get to the best college and you're going to go to the library every week and kind of read all the latest books and you're going to take advantage of summer programs that are free and you're going to learn how to do X and Y. And that's just the expectation. So long answer to, I guess when I put myself out there to the universe with teachers, they would sort of say, oh, she's ready, willing, and able. Let's pick her for this. So absolutely, right? Like we never get anywhere without kind of amazing mentors and people kind of picking you out of the crowd. So I definitely had that for sure, for certain. And I always reflect on how my parents just like made this expectation, but they didn't make me feel like anxiety around it. They didn't make me feel pressure or like I couldn't do it. It was just like, this is how it's going to be. And so I think I think it's a different version or like it's a slightly different like on-ramp to kind of what you described with a cousin, where I'm sure she did the same thing, which is she was known, she was out there. She wanted to be picked up for these programs. So she allowed herself to be picked up for the programs and she allowed herself to be noticed by people. And so I think, family is so important in this in terms of setting kind of a high bar for excellence and expectation. And that's how I think about that question, Kevin.
What did you do for fun growing up?
So I loved two things that I still do to this day. I love playing tennis. My dad would play tennis with my brother and myself pretty much, I want to say like 10 months out of the year. He would always play with my older brother first, and then I would always get like the last 20 minutes, and then I would play against kind of like a wall. And at some point, I got a little bit better than my brother because I was just watching them play and I was just hitting against the wall. And but by the time I started playing kind of sports in junior high and high school, I was not too bad. So I'm slow and I don't play as much as I used to, but I love playing tennis. My kids have picked up on it, which makes me super happy. And my 84-year-old dad still plays a couple times a week. So it's a super fun sport that can last a long time. And I'm an introvert, which means like in my job, it's very public and open facing, and I'm making kind of so many speeches a week, but I love to be inside my head. And so I love reading. I love going for long bike rides by myself. I love going for long runs by myself. I love just being inside my head. That's my comfort place. So I can, be lots of things like, all of us can be as the situation needs, but my happiest place is inside my head.
This is a totally tangential question on something I've been pondering for the last couple of months since in my return to school, which has nothing to do with the interview, but I have to ask you since you said what you said. You said you love reading. Now, personally, I read well. I'm an actor. You have to read scripts and such. But since I was little, I always had an astigmatism. I wore thick glasses my whole life. So when I would eat, I get sleepy. And I never wanted to fall asleep in the middle of the day, but I have to read the book. So now I shun away from reading, and someone introduced me to audiobooks. I
was going to say podcasting must be like your dream, right? Or audiobooks. Yeah.
I came back to college. Somebody said, Kev, don't read the book. Go to YouTube or get Audible or Speechify, right? So I got introduced to all these tools to help me succeed in my second academic journey. But my question is, here's the magic question. If you listen to an audiobook, can you tell people that you read the book?
Absolutely.
Okay, well that settles it.
I don't hesitate at that. And
Okay.
I feel like podcasts are the same as like reading the newspaper or reading magazines.
Yeah.
Audio and physical books, Kindle, ebooks. You read the book.
Now, it's funny because I would ask people.
I can see why that might be controversial, why people might not agree. But for me, the verb of reading, like, did you read a book? Like, let me tell you about this amazing book, period. And you could have a full-on conversation about an incredible book that you experienced through, audio versus visual. But let me tell you about a great book. Like, that's the important nugget, I think.
Now, I appreciate so much that you gave me a response. Now, I know this is one of those responses you could go to sleep and wake up and have a whole other view tomorrow. Well, I thought about it or whatever. But I agree with you totally, right?
Yeah.
So I asked one of my PhD friends this question a couple months ago, and her response was, no, you can't say you read the book because reading is a specific set of actions and you are not executing those actions. And halfway through her response, I said, you know what, why don't you be quiet? I don't even know why I asked you the question, right? But now this is a dear friend of mine.
Yeah.
But it was one of those things where as technology evolves and culture evolves, we call things ebooks, but technically the book is a specific thing.
Yeah,
when
exactly. You turn a page, it's physical.
Right. It was physical, binders, publishing house, in a library, and then the ebook. So it's a concept the evolution of a concept.
Yeah, the technology is evolving. So I feel like you should be a pain in your ass, pain in the ass to your friend. Be like, what books have you consumed lately? Well, and you should just use a different word. What books are you into? What books have you consumed lately? We talk about voracious readers, right? Voracious is about appetites. And so, what are you into? What have you consumed? What books have you finished lately? I feel like there's so many ways to get around that.
Right.
My dad's a big book reader and audiobook consumer. And he does both. And partly it's just like he's older and his eyes hurt. And so sometimes he'll get the large print books from the library if they have them. If they're not available, he'll just go to the ebook. And I ask him every week, what new book have you, I probably use the word read, but I'd say like, what new books are you into? I feel like I use that phrase a lot. And I actually think it brings, voices are so interesting. And I actually think audiobooks are super interesting. The casting of the voices for books are fascinating.
Well, I returned to school. I dropped out of school 33 years ago, returned 2 years ago, got my degree, but I would have never succeeded. My return is very successful, right? My transcript is A's, and it's such a change from who I used to be.
Yep.
I'm the kid that when I got my Pell Grant, it wasn't for school, it was for clothes, right? So now I have a whole nother outlet on the situation, but I came to succeed. I came to win. I made that decision.
Yeah.
But I knew, oh my goodness, one of my first classes, we're reading half a novel a week and writing right? So by the end of the semester, we've read 6 novels. Okay. And I said to myself, oh man, I'm gonna fall asleep every time I open a book. I'm getting to page 3 and now I'm dozing off and coffee and So I was terrified until my young nephew, who's always looking for an easy way out, right? He's always
so smart. He's gonna rule the world one day.
He gave me the tip. He said, Kev, no, a lot of these books, they're on YouTube. A lot of them, they're Audible.
Oh, smart.
He said, Kev, you have to do it now. I was like, this is great.
So smart.
Doing it as I was consuming it and getting reacclimated to academia, I felt like, what do I tell people?
Yep.
How do I describe what I'm doing? Can I say this? Is this okay? So I'm glad I met you. And
no reservations whatsoever. You are a smart man. I need to learn from you. I feel like there are people who are like, work smarter, not harder. I think I've always been a work hard, and that just means putting in more hours or hitting my head against a wall or whatever. And I wish I was a work smarter, not harder person.
Now, when you don't, your eyes don't start getting heavy after a few pages. That doesn't happen to you and your father. That's not what happens to you guys.
I don't read books at night, I think, for that reason. I try to like do most of my reading over a weekend and just like power through it. And just give it a couple hours. And I also, I can't read long books. So I feel like my limit is about 300 pages, which I know I can complete in like 5 or 6 hours. So a couple hours on Saturday, a couple hours on a Sunday, I can get through it.
Wow. That's all I have to say. Wow.
Yeah. As I hear myself, I'm like, oh God, again, card carrying nerd. We established that from the beginning. I like numbers and data and calculations. And that's just what makes me happy. And I'm sure people watching this are like, oh my God.
Sports talk radio all the time. I don't really listen to music. So there's this show called The Michael K Show. And one of the hosts is Don LaGreca. And he's always buying these autobiographies of the different athletes that they interview.
Oh, interesting.
Like, yeah, I just finished a book and I'm about to start another book. And he's saying this like every week. He's reading a book. And I'm like, dude, you don't get sleepy? How do you even, I don't even know how you could do it because I'm going to fall asleep. And in the middle, for me, it's middle of the day. If I read, I'm wide awake, middle of the day, start reading, page 5.
Yeah.
Rolling over to take a nap. I don't know.
So here's what got me over the edge. And probably, I've got 2 kids. They're, teenagers or 12 and 14. And so for a long time, like I have these lost years where it's just like working and being a parent and getting the kids, through everything. And so I've picked up reading big time, I'd say in the past, maybe 5-6 years. And the reason why I did it, because I think my answer, people would always ask me, what have you read lately? And I'd always be like, oh, I'm so busy. And I'd feel a little bit guilty about that I wasn't, just aware of kind of, pop culture wise, what was going on. And I remember reading an article where like, really, again, commercially successful people like Warren Buffett or Bill Gates, they read multiple books a week. And I was like, no, come on. How do they have time to do it? So I was like, okay, Angie, you have to stop saying you don't have the time. And then, I don't know how anyone can do multiple books a week unless it's like your profession to be an editor. But I was like, I can try to do a book. I have always had a goal of a book a week. I don't come close. I usually, in the course of a year, will read a book every 2 weeks. So I'll get through about 25 books a year. And I just sort of have that goal for myself of I want to find, really interesting books that are culturally relevant, that are interesting, that tell a story. And it's a little bit, I always am just thinking of Bill Gates and Warren Buffett. They can do it. I certainly can. But yeah, I don't do it at night because I will fall asleep just like you described.
Okay, so back to you. Where'd you go to college?
I went to undergrad at Cornell University in Ithaca, New York, and I majored in business management.
Okay, you got your bachelor's degree.
Mm-hmm.
Then what did you do?
Got my bachelor's degree, and then I was working in finance, partly because, again, been investing since I was 10 years old. It was comfortable. Knew, again, kid of immigrant parents, knew it would make me some money. Didn't love it, didn't make my heart sing, but seemed pragmatic, good skills. So I worked in banking for 4 years in finance. And then I kind of knew my jam was always going to be about more around social impact, more around kind of doing things to make the world more fair and equitable. I remember growing up hearing a lot about in India, a lot of inequity was just built into the society, and it really upset my parents. It was a big part in terms of why they wanted to move to America. And so always had that in me. And so after 4 years, I went to grad school for public policy. So I went to the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard for a 2-year program, which was awesome. And that helped me change and really switch careers from the private sector into kind of the nonprofit and public sector. So I got my first job as an executive director right after grad school and have been in this space of kind of education and job training ever since.
That trajectory is so impressive. I'm almost in awe of those credentials, right? So tell me something.
I had to get into Harvard to satisfy my dad and to justify getting out of banking. So again, I had that goal, and my dad didn't have anything to protest because he was very proud of his daughter to get into Harvard, even if it wasn't in the business school.
Right. Of course.
Always being pragmatic.
Yeah, super impressive. So you're obviously, you became an executive director after grad school. So you were like a 25-year-old executive director. Did you find any issues with the human part? Like people being the supervisor over people who are older than you? So
thankfully in my first job, I didn't. And I was there for like four or 5 years. It was a volunteer organization. So I managed youngish, kind of fresh out of college volunteers who would do mentoring and job training to individuals who are looking to either get into the workforce or upgrade their skills. And so it was a great first job because I didn't, and it was founded by a bunch of relatively younger professionals. And so we were all within 5 years of each other. And so I didn't have that experience. The job that I took after that, I was working in government, where I was the young little Miss Thang. And that's where I get into the sense of, are you sure? And so that's real. I actually still feel it today. It's interesting. I feel like I always get questions on, what's it like being a leader who's a woman or a leader, a woman of color. And in my mind, those have not been as big of a barrier to me, or at least I haven't felt it. I'm sure I have either benefited or not benefited from those attributes. Probably not, unknowingly, but I have felt my age really be an issue. And so higher ed, it skews very much older, very white, very male in general. And so you add all of that, but I am younger. And again, I'm a grown ass woman. I'm 48 years old. You're not young. My kids remind me, not young, mom. You're not so you're not a spring chicken. But in this industry, I am.
Right.
And so that plus I don't even have my PhD. Shocker, right? That I could be a dean at a school, top 25 school in the country without a PhD. That also I'd say is one. I think I've gotten past that because I think when you're in a dean, you're in management. And I think you can show management and leadership and not, the fact that I don't write scholarly articles, like that's just not part of the job. But I feel my age gets people to probably question me and my experience and credentials much more than being a woman or a person of color.
Okay. You gave us some great professional development advice in the very beginning, right? That's how we started the conversation. Usually at the end of the conversation, I start fishing for advice, any tips you would share, right? But you gave us quite a bit at the top. But that being said, let me dig into something you said specifically. So the legend of Harvard, the Harvard culture, the Harvard community, is that really a game changer? Having that on your resume?
The education there was good. It didn't blow me away. The access to amazing guest speakers blew me away. I was there between 2000 and 2002. So we had the infamous election with George Bush and the hanging chads. We had 9/11. That was the time when Bono and Bill Clinton were running around the world working on AIDS in Africa. And it was like a really important time. And all of those folks came. And it was 2000 was the election where John McCain really got kind of skewered by his opponents. And so all of those folks just came and kind of spent some time at the Kennedy School to teach us, to talk to us, to meet with us. And so that was incredible. And it's incredible to realize, oh, these are just normal, breathing, walking humans. They're smart. They've had good opportunity, but they're pretty normal, actually. The classes themselves, good skills that you can get anywhere, how to run a budget, how to make performance dashboards, how to think about finance, how to negotiate, how to understand affordable housing policy issues, all that stuff, all could happen anywhere. Access was great. And, in these moments where I feel young, in these moments where I acknowledge I don't have a PhD, it's not a bad thing to sort of say, when I was in Cambridge, drop that in, not always, because gosh, that would be obnoxious, right? But in these moments where like you can just read the room, and folks are being how they are. I have been known to maybe drop the when I was in Cambridge comment. And so long way to say, is it helpful? Sure. Is it the be all and end all? Not at all. Is the quality of the education so vastly different? No. Does it give you a really kind of interesting perspective on, you look behind the hood. It felt like I got a peek behind the Wizard of Oz, and it's not all that fancy, but it is also interesting to kind of, understand that we put things on pedestals, and when you actually get to look behind the curtain, more normal than amazing. I mean, I go back to my experience working at Perscolis in the South Bronx and Mott Haven. And I learned more from my coworkers and from students at Perscolis. 85% of our team were people of color. We had an awesome track record of hiring our students to then become IT instructors. We specialized in training people who had a high school equivalency, but no college. Smartest people ever, most entrepreneurial people ever. My parents would always say, like, don't be impressed by the person who came from privilege and achieved great heights. Be super impressed with a person who came from much more modest backgrounds, who achieved maybe half as much greatness, if not more greatness. That's the person you watch for. That's the person you emulate. That's the person who is much more meaningful in terms of being, a teacher, because what they overcame to get to where they got, that's the thing to be respectful and to have more curiosity around. And so, I think I've always been able to put into perspective. I was curious about the nerd in me was curious about what Harvard would be like. Been there, done that. Fine, great, proud, but I probably ended up being classmates with a lot of folks who came from a lot, who achieved a lot. And I think, being able to be at a place like Perscolis where people achieved a lot and came from a much, bigger distance to travel, boy, that excites me much more every day of the week than, someone who maybe only had to travel a bit of distance.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, those things they sound super impressive, right? The Kennedy School at Harvard and Cambridge sound like they sound like a PhD in my mind, right?
Thank you.
It's like game over, end the game. What else do we have? So that is very impressive. Your grasp on those skill sets, those 3 skill sets is clear. It shines through. What I'm going to ask the question: What advice do you have for someone who wants to get it all, who wants to be a dean, but has no idea? What advice do you have?
Yeah. So earlier in March, I think I was at an event. It was for women, female entrepreneurs. And it was sort of like I think they called it the Founders Forum at NYU. And it was a great group of probably like 200 women that included students who wanted to kind of maybe be entrepreneurs, actual women who were entrepreneurs, venture capitalists who were funding female entrepreneurs. We had like really candid discussions on the fact that like 3% of venture capital goes to female backed businesses. And there were a lot of questions from the group of, I want to start something. I have that drive, but like, what do I do? Do I become a lawyer and specialize in contracts? Do I go into banking? Do I work in products? Like, what do I do? And so it was a lot of questions with a lot of people who didn't quite know what they wanted to do, but they know that being an entrepreneur was their dream. They knew they wanted to be successful. They knew they wanted to be independent. They knew they wanted to kind of be creative, and they didn't know how. And so at that event, someone raised their hand. It was a student, and she said to some of the more established entrepreneurs and bankers and finance folks on the stage, and she said, "Do any of you ever feel like you have imposter syndrome?" Right? And one of the panelists who had worked in startups and now was on the funding side, she was in venture capital, she leaned in and she gave the best advice I've really heard in a very long time, Kevin. And she said, imposter syndrome is your edge. It is your superpower. You never want to be the smartest person in the room. If you feel like an imposter, what does that mean? It means you are humble. It means you don't know it all. It means you ask questions. It means you work harder. It means that you have curiosity. It means that you are going to hustle till you figure it out. So she said, never lose your imposter syndrome. It is your edge. Lean into it. Always feel like you're an imposter, because that's who leaders and entrepreneurs want. They want the person with an outside point of view. Don't ever try to be the smartest person in the room. Those people are deplorable. They're not fun. They're arrogant. And so the notion of, because we hear this all the time as people of color or as women or anyone who's kind of, maybe not just, straight up privileged, feeling imposter syndrome, we always sort of say, yeah, I feel that too. It sucks. It makes me feel othered or not wanted or not great. And I have felt that, certainly, right? And I am never going to forget this woman, Maya, who said, don't apologize for it. Embrace it. Lean into it. It's your edge. It's why you're hustling and the person next to you isn't. What is wrong with that? And I was like, damn, girl, that is good advice. That is great advice. And I was like, there has to be a TED Talk on this or something. I haven't quite found it, but that is just great advice. And of course, like if we use different words and sort of said, do you want to be curious or, the know-it-all? Do you want to be the person who works really hard or the person who dials it in? Do you want to be the person who, who's a know-it-all, or do you want to be the person asking questions? I'm pretty sure most people would pick things that are typically described as imposter syndrome like. And so just to flip that was nice. And then, there was a +1 from everyone on the panel. And the other piece of advice that came out of that conversation, another woman in the panel sort of said, I've been in a lot of rooms, a lot of smart people. And she said the delta between that person who is the smartest person in the room and you always seems a lot bigger, and it's always in reality a lot smaller. And so just know that delta, that difference, it's in our mind. And so I don't even know if that's the answer to your question, Kevin, but I knew I wanted to share that because I just found that to be very profound. And again, turning kind of supposed weaknesses into strengths is super important. And I feel grateful that I think with every passing year, we get language and we get a little bit more empathetic. We get a little bit more open to understanding that there's a lot of differences between people, and differences in bad. We're not where we need to be yet, but gosh, we're better than we were 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 50 years ago. We're better than we were a couple years ago. And that feels really important to be able to acknowledge, even though we can also acknowledge we're not where we need to be. And there's kind of a bunch of barriers that are still in the way of progress. We've come a long way.
That response was outstanding. That was excellent response. We did City Tutors did an event of is imposter syndrome a thing like a week ago. Right?
Oh my gosh. Did anyone share what this woman Maya shared?
No, nobody did. No.
Everyone keeps I even was sort of validating imposter syndrome because it's important to validate that there's this feeling out there that we don't fit in. That is not, I definitely don't want anyone to feel like I'm invalidating that, but the notion of it's present, we all feel it, everyone feels it, everyone. Doesn't matter who you are, where you went to college, or what your job is, everyone feels it, and accept it, lean into it. That's so interesting. So now I've given you that. And so you can, we can kind of exponentially get this message out there. But I thought it was really important for people to hear because we talk about it a lot and it's real, but we don't have to just accept it as a bad thing. We can reframe it a little bit as so what?
It was a powerful response. And that event, just the topic was one of our largest events.
It's real. We all feel it, period.
And I'm a stand-up comic. So, the comedian's mentality is typically, oh, that's a lot of crap. That doesn't even exist. That's not real. There's people that just dismiss things.
Right. I think people think that's an excuse. It's no, it's a feeling. It's real, right. But it doesn't have to be to your detriment.
Right. Absolutely. And so did you answer the question? You absolutely did.
Okay.
But you answered the question so many times just from the start of this conversation. It was a pleasure to speak to you. Right. I took notes.
You're a very good interviewer.
Well, thank you for that. But it was a pleasure. It was an honor. And you are the reason that we do these podcasts. You are the validation for this idea. Because when I got hired to the City Tutors, I come from an entertainment background. And in this young startup, the small, upstart startup, not in the not-for-profit sector, I said, hey, we should do a podcast. Now, when you offer an idea, when you're the new kid at the job and you offer an idea, you don't know if anybody's going to accept the idea. You don't know if the idea is going to work. You don't know anything, right? So I threw out the idea. Our executive director, Gary Rifkin, he received it. Oh, that's a good idea. We should. Yeah. So now I have to execute this thing I suggested. And you are the physical manifestation of why the idea was so brilliant. Because
I love you for saying that. My 15-year-old daughter, my 14-year-old daughter who's overhearing this, I am going to get a mouthful from her in a minute because she's laughing in the background.
I have a 14-year-old.
Appreciate that.
14-year-old daughter, so I know what that's like. I know exactly what it's like. But yeah,
You bring me down to earth, but I appreciate you're bringing me up for an hour.
but you represent so much, because the whole point of this was to demonstrate there's a young person who's growing up as a nerd right now and trying to figure it out, right? They feel comfortable, they're not in their skin, they don't know if this or that, whatever. So you represent so many things that that demonstrate it's not about where you start, it's where you end, right?
Yeah.
And you are that, and you are clearly brilliant. You clearly, brilliant. Brilliant is a great word to encapsulate what you represent.
You are very kind, and I will take that. But such a pleasure. Thank you so much for letting me share a little bit of my story and what life looks like in my corner of the world. But I very much appreciate it. And again, I know that City Tutors is awesome. The mentoring and the exposure and the community that you've built, both with students and with kind of guests and mentors, is really powerful. And we know that that's how people move ahead. It's how they get opportunities. It's how they get jobs. And it's how people get inspired and feel like they're not alone. So kudos to you guys. Really, really appreciate what you guys do.
Well, thank you for giving us your time. We really appreciate it. Thank you.